They told me I was free. They used that word free, like it was a gift they were handing me. Something clean and shiny that would wash away the grit of my entire life. This apartment is part of the gift. It's on the 12th floor of a building that seems to be made of glass. It has a bed that doesn't feel like a slab of rock, a window that looks out onto a city I've only ever seen in faded, forbidden pictures, and food that doesn't taste of dust and desperation. My keepers, my liberators, are very proud of the food. All I have to do is talk. That's the deal. Every day, I sit in a quiet, sterile room with a man who never blinks, and I tell him about my life in the K7 labor colony. He calls it a debriefing, a nice, clean word for peeling back my skin layer by layer. I talk about the quarries, the barracks, the twice daily head counts, and the freezing rain. I give him names, routines, the quiet ways we learn to survive. I do it without emotion, a perfect little machine of memory. I do it for my family. That's the goal. Get through this, give them what they want, and they'll bring Anya and the girls. My wife, my 2 daughters. That's the prize waiting at the end of all this talking. I was born in K7. So was my father. We were payment for a crime my grandfather committed, a man I never knew, for a rebellion so old no one even remembers what it was for anymore. Guilt is the only thing we inherited in that place. It's in the water, in the rationed bread, in the gray dust that coats your lungs. Your life isn't your own. It's just the continuation of a punishment. You're born into the middle of a sentence that never ends. But even in a place built for death, you find a reason for life. I found Anya in the laundry block, her hands always raw from the lie, but gentler than anything I'd ever known. Her laughter was a forbidden sound, a flicker of color in a world of gray. We carved out a small space that belonged to us, a pocket of warmth in the endless, biting cold of the barracks. Then came Rinny, our firstborn, with Anya's serious eyes that seemed to see right through the fences. 2 years later, little Sophia, who somehow learned to laugh before she learned to fear. They were 2 impossible sparks in the endless gray, 2 reasons to keep my head down and my back strong. That's when the hope started. It was a stupid, dangerous thing, a weed growing through a crack in the concrete. I started to believe in the deepest, most hidden part of myself that maybe I could break the cycle, that if I just kept my head down, worked harder than anyone else, and never stepped out of line, my girls wouldn't have to inherit my punishment. Maybe they could see a sky that wasn't crisscrossed with razor wire, a feral kind of hope, the kind that gets you killed. So when the man who never blinks slid the papers across the table, cooperation, liberation, a new start, I saw my chance. I saw Anya's face, Rinny's serious little eyes, Sophia's laugh. They were my only goal. So I signed, I talked, I gave them every piece of my past they asked for. I do it for them. That's what I tell myself every morning when I wake up in this soft bed. It's what I whisper to myself every night when the silence comes.
The quiet here is louder than the quarry ever was. In the colony, you always had the noise, the grinding of machinery from the processing plant, the guards' boots on gravel, the constant wet coughing from the next bunk over. It was the soundtrack of survival. Here, the silence presses in, and in it, I remember everything. The man who never blinks, his name is Eris, he told me, a friendly name for an unfriendly face, sits across from me every morning in the debriefing room. He asks about supply routes, guard schedules, the names of the barracks foremen. I give him the information like I'm handing over stones, one by one. lifeless, heavy. He nods, makes notes on a tablet, and never, ever blinks. After our sessions, my time is my own. I explore my cage. The apartment is filled with things I don't know how to use. There are dozens of buttons on the wall for lights, for temperature, for music I don't want to hear. The food appears in a small compartment by the door, always warm, always more than I can eat. For the first week, it was the silence that felt like the real guard. A heavy, suffocating silence that left too much room for my thoughts. Then, I started to hear it. Faintly, at first. The distinct, rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel. It was the sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. The sound of a guard walking the perimeter fence at K7. But there was no gravel here. My apartment was on the 12th floor, surrounded by concrete and steel. The street below was a smooth black ribbon of silent vehicles. I would stand at the window for hours, watching the city lights blur, trying to place the sound. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks on me, an echo of a life I was supposed to be leaving behind, a ghost in my ears. But the sound was always there, just at the edge of hearing. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. A metronome counting down to something I couldn't see. Eris started taking me on outings, trips to show me the new world. We went to a market overflowing with more food than I'd seen in my entire life. Colors so bright they hurt my eyes. We went to a library where the books didn't have pages torn out for kindling. He was showing me the prize, dangling the future in front of me like a piece of meat. I tried to believe it. For Anya and the girls, I had to believe it. "This can all be theirs, Luka," he'd say, his hand on my shoulder, the sound of boots on gravel, a faint mocking rhythm in the back of my head. I was living in two worlds at once, the bright, clean one Eris showed me, and the gray, familiar one my own senses refused to let go of.
One afternoon, Eris took me to a park. I had never been in a park before. The grass was impossibly green, and children were laughing on a swing set, their voices bright and sharp. It was all so painfully normal, like a scene from one of the forbidden books. It felt like a stage. I was an actor who didn't know his lines. Eris bought me a hot drink that smelled of cinnamon, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "A taste of freedom," he said. As I turned to thank him, my gaze drifted past his shoulder to a small pond where ducks were swimming in lazy circles. The sun was bright, the surface of the water like a distorted mirror. And in the reflection, it wasn't Eris standing next to me. For a single heart-stopping second, the reflection was of a man in the drab gray uniform of a K7 camp guard. The face was bloated and cruel, a face I recognized from 1,000 morning head counts. Guard Sergeant Volkov, a man who broke fingers for fun. His mouth was twisted into a familiar sneer. His hand in the reflection wasn't holding a paper cup. It was resting on the butt of a heavy black pistol holstered at his hip. I blinked hard, a gasp catching in my throat, and it was gone. Eris was just Eris again, smiling his empty smile, asking if I liked the drink. My heart hammered against my ribs, cold dread washing over me. On the grass near the pond lay a small, discarded doll, its arm torn off at the shoulder. It looked just like the one I had carved for Sophia out of a piece of scrap wood, right down to the same missing arm where the wood had splintered. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I spent the next 2 days in a fog of denial. It was a trick of the light, a symptom of stress. My mind was broken from years in the colony, that's all. But the image of Volkov's face was burned into my mind. The sound of boots on gravel seemed to get louder, more insistent, even during the day. The perfect, clean world they had built for me suddenly felt thin, like a painted backdrop that could tear at any moment.
This wasn't a debriefing. It was a test, and I was failing. I had to know. My freedom had rules. I could go anywhere on my floor, use the small gym, visit the rooftop garden, but the door at the very end of the hall, the one marked service, was always locked. I had been told it was for maintenance staff only. That night, sleep was impossible. The crunch of the phantom boots followed me to my bed. I slipped out of my apartment, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet. My hand trembled as I tried the handle on the service door. Locked. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A faint line of blue light under the door. I pressed my ear against the cold metal and heard a low electronic hum. Driven by a desperation that overpowered my fear, I returned to my apartment, took a thin metal butter knife from the kitchen, and went back. It took 10 minutes of frantic, clumsy work, my breath catching in my throat at every scrape of metal on metal, but the lock finally clicked open. I pushed the door open an inch and peered into the darkness.
It wasn't a maintenance closet. The room was bathed in the cold blue glow of dozens of screens. My apartment, every angle of it was on display. The living room where I sat and stared at the walls. The kitchen where I picked the rich food. The bedroom where I thought I was alone with my nightmares. There was even a screen focused on the empty bed, the sheets still rumpled from where I had been lying moments before. And sitting in a chair in the center of the room, his face illuminated by the monitors, was a man in the full gray uniform of a K7 camp guard. It was him, Sergeant Volkov, the face from the reflection. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was looking right at me, through the crack in the door. He didn't raise an alarm. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just slowly lifted a hand and tapped 2 fingers against his temple and a mock salute. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a keeper watching his animal pace its cage. A smile that said everything without a single word. We see you. We hear you. Welcome to your new life. I didn't sleep before my final assessment. I sat by the window watching the city breathe light into the darkness, memorizing the shape of a life that was almost mine, Anya's. The girls. The sound of boots on gravel was gone. The silence was back, absolute and final. Hope, that stupid feral thing, was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was all a test. A brutal, cruel test. But the prize was real. I had to believe the prize was real. The assessment room was on the top floor. It had no windows, just plush gray carpet and a long, polished table that reflected the sterile lights above. Eris was there, along with 2 other officials in identical sharp suits. Their smiles were nailed in place. "Luka," the lead official began, his voice smooth as polished stone, "we have been remarkably cooperative. We have one final question, a formality. In your own words, reflecting on your past and the new future the state has offered you, how do you feel?" This was the moment. I saw Volkov's knocking salute. I saw his face in the bond. I knew this was a trap. They wanted to know if the rot was still in me, the same rot that was in my grandfather. To lie? To grovel and praise the hand that had crushed my family for generations? That was the thinking of a prisoner, a slave. But they were offering me the life of a free man. A free man tells the truth. My hope, my feral, stupid hope, told me that honesty was the final key. They needed to see I was reformed, not just broken. That I could be a citizen, not just a subject. I took a breath. My life in K7 was an injustice. It was a punishment for a crime I didn't commit. It was cruel. But I am grateful for this opportunity. The chance to prove that I am more than my grandfather's ghost.
the chance for my children to live a life of dignity, a real life. The smiles at the table didn't just vanish, they curdled. It was like watching masks of flesh melt away, revealing the cold, hard granite beneath. Eris's face went blank, his eyes like two chips of glass. A silent understanding passed between them. The air in the room dropped 20 degrees. Before I could process it, the doors burst open, and two men in the drab gray uniforms of K7 guards stormed in. They weren't reflections. They grabbed my arms in a grip of bone-deep ownership. I didn't fight. I had been fighting a ghost all along. They dragged me from the room, the plush carpet burning my cheek as I fell. The last thing I saw was Eris looking down at me, his expression not of anger, but of simple, profound disappointment, as if a lab rat had failed to navigate a maze correctly.
They put me in a cell that was the exact opposite of my apartment. It was a concrete box, damp and cold, smelling of mildew and defeat. A solitary world of gray. For a week, I was left alone with the echoes of my own words. The silence was heavy, broken only by the drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Then the door scraped open. It was Volkov, the guard from the surveillance room, the face from the pond. He placed a tray of the old food, the tasteless gray nutrient paste, on the floor just inside the door. "You almost passed, you know," he said, his voice casual, conversational. "The loyalty assessment. We run it on all the high-risk bloodlines. Granddaddy was a real firebrand. We've been waiting to see if it bred true." He chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "Your cooperation was perfect. Your gratitude was perfect. You just couldn't help yourself at the end, could you? The flaw in the genetics. Had to talk about injustice." He shook his head slowly. "You have now been officially processed. Welcome back, rebel." My blood ran cold. "My family," I whispered, the words scraping my throat raw. "Anya, the girls, the deal?" He gave me that smile, the smile of a keeper looking at his animal. "The deal is void. Your actions have consequences. Your descent has proven that the infection in your bloodline is active." He slid a thin piece of paper through the slot in the door. It was an official transfer order. My name was on it, and below it, Anya's, Rinny's, Sophia's. "As a confirmed dissident, your family's sentence has been adjusted. For your crime, for the crime you committed with your own words in that room, they have been resentenced. 250 years. The concrete beneath me seemed to fall away. It wasn't the number that broke me. It was the simple, horrific math. I had done this. My desperate, clawing hope for their freedom was the very thing that built their prison. Every soft bed, every warm meal, every kind word from Eris was a stone in the wall that would now surround my daughters for the rest of their lives. I didn't just fail to save them. I had personally authored their damnation. I became the curse I had spent my entire life trying to outrun. I'm still in this cell. I don't know for how long. The only thing I have is the sound. It's always there now, just outside my door. The steady, rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel. A perfect, unending circle. It's the sound of my guilt, the sound of my failure. It is the sound of my children's future, walking back and forth forever.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. Like and subscribe for more nightmares. Your support keeps the darkness from consuming this channel, so we can face the next terrifying story together. Don't be left in the dark.